Welcome to CoLab Church Reimagine. I'm John Murlock. So far in this series on CoLab, we've talked about covenant, we've talked about collaboration, we've talked about learning, shared staffing, storytelling, abundance. But if we're going to be faithful and not just idealistic, we need to talk about what happens when things get hard because let's be honest, they do. Things get very difficult when you start including people, right? When it's just us solo on our own, right? We can often move very quickly, but we cannot go far. And so going far requires collaborating, it requires partners, it requires relationships, but relationships are also quite difficult. So, welcome to episode 9, Holy Disruption. And holy disruption it is, friends. We're going to talk about the tension, we're going to talk about failures, we're going to talk about resistance, and we're going to talk about the real mess of collaborative ministry and why we still believe it's worth it. Let's name it. Collaboration sounds great until you actually have to do it. Suddenly, questions arise. Who's in charge? What if our beliefs, ideas, concepts, values, visions, strategies don't fully align? How do we split the cost? How do we split the credit? Sometimes we get territorial. Sometimes we try to avoid conflict and dress it up with a nice word like grace. Sometimes we say yes far too quickly, and then later on we get resentful. That's not failure, that's being human. Because collaboration isn't magic, it's muscle. And muscles only grow through strain. And this is why covenant community matters. It holds us together when convenience won't. See, I've seen it firsthand. Two churches try to share a staff member and realize they have very different expectations. One church wants someone who is in the office all the time, who's consistent and dependable. Doesn't really matter how much they get done. That church wants that person to be present and available. The other church wants that staff member to produce and to get a lot done and doesn't want that staff person interrupted, right? And so those two things start bumping into one another quite quickly. Or you're working on a joint worship plan and it begins to fall apart because one person almost always ends up taking the lead when they see things not getting done in the time frame that they expected. So either they sit in their frustration and feel like a failure, or they start doing the work, but then the other folks who were like, hey, I wasn't there yet, I didn't have those anxieties about this thing, right? They begin to go, why did you go and make all of the decisions? Why did you do all of the work? Or third one, a promising idea gets stuck because no one wants to step on anyone's toes. Because let's be honest, friends, good ideas will always step on toes. Otherwise, the status quo will remain. And these are not signs that we're doing it wrong. They're signs that we're doing something real. Disruption is holy when it makes us stop and ask, what matters most? Are we willing to grow? Can we hold tension with some level of grace? In Acts 15, the early church was fighting hard about what to require of all of these new Gentile believers, of all this diversity of believers. And then, instead of just fighting hard, they discerned. They stayed in the room with one another. They sat across the table with one another. They broke bread together. And guess what happened? The church found a way forward. Sometimes, sometimes the breakthrough happens with all of this sense of energy. Sometimes that breakthrough happens and there's this sense of breathing on the other side, a sense of relief. And sometimes a breakthrough happens and there's no fanfare, no accomplishment on the other side. It comes when an elder board chooses to listen instead of defend. It comes when a pastor says, I need help, and people begin to show up. It comes when a church says, we'll let go of our way so we can discover God's way together. When the dust clears, we realize we've grown deeper trust, we've widened our vision, we've discovered new resilience. And the Spirit's greatest work often happens in the disruption, not by avoiding it, but by coming together and having the conflict. That's when the Spirit does the Spirit's best work. So, what's the disruption you're navigating right now? What tension are you tempted to walk away from, to essentially ghost another individual? What if you stayed? What if you had the courage to speak, not out of obligation, not out of fear or anxiety, but out of trust that something holy might be trying to emerge, might be trying to push through, might be trying to come out of this egg? The gospel was born in disruption. Resurrection only comes after Friday and Saturday. And the church was never meant to be a place of comfort alone. It was always meant to be a place of transformation. Friends, my hope is that you will stay with me through the hard stuff. In our final episode of this season, we'll look ahead to the future, not just of CoLab, but of the whole church. Episode 10, a movement of covenant communities. Until then, stay in the room, stay at the table, hold the tension, trust the Spirit. You're not alone. Thanks, everyone.